Joins us now with reaction, Florida Senator Marco Rubio. Senator, good morning to you.
Likewise. Thank you for having me.
What'd you make of the Benghazi hearings yesterday?
I think very insightful, and there's not a lot more to be learned now. Here's what we know about Benghazi. First of all, that post probably shouldn't have been open. And the people in charge of that, Secretary Clinton and the State Department, they had a steady stream of reporting that showed how dangerous it was. It was one of the reasons why the British pulled out of there. And so we knew that it was a dangerous place to begin with. Second, they didn't have adequate security for the place. So it was dangerous, and then they left it open, but they didn't give them adequate security. Third, apparently they didn't give them enough response teams to respond to any sort of attack. And fourth, now there are people saying that maybe there's something we could have done for the second wave of the attack, but they didn't let us go. So these four things are very, very troubling. And, I just want to congratulate those like Fox News and others that have kept on this issue, because this is not about politics. This is about accountability. Someone needs to be held accountable for what's happened here, but it's also about preventing this from happening in the future.
Sure.
If we don't know honestly what happened here, how are we going to prevent this from happening in the future to other diplomatic outposts around the world? This is not about hurting anybody politically. This is about getting to the truth so that people can be held accountable and so that we can prevent this from happening again in the future.
You know what, Senator, clearly the administration and the political people made a calculation. All right, let's send Susan Rice out there, and she's going to say it was that video. That's what stirred up Libya. Here is Greg Hicks, who was on the ground in Libya on that day, reacting to the fact that he heard Ambassador Rice blame the video. Here he is.
I was stunned. My jaw dropped, and I was embarrassed.
Did she talk to you before she went on the 5 Sunday talk shows?
No, sir.
You were the highest ranking official in Libya at the time, correct?
Yes, sir.
And she did not bother to have a conversation with you before she went on national television?
No, sir.
Is just crazy. Then Mr. Hicks talked about how he talked to one of his supervisors, Assistant Secretary Beth Jones, and said, why did the ambassador say it was a video? And then her reaction was, I don't know, but made it very clear from the tone, shut up and move on. Later, he was reprimanded. He'd always had great reviews. And then he was demoted from the deputy chief of mission to a desk officer simply for essentially challenging Susan Rice.
Yeah, that's right. Well, I think there's 2 reasons why that happened. Number one is the president was in the middle of his re-election. One of his talking points was that terrorism had been defeated and he had defeated it. And this ran counter to that narrative. They didn't want to admit there was a terrorist attack, because to admit it was a terrorist attack was to admit that terrorism was still out there and reaching us. And so that's the reason why they sent the order, in my opinion, in some way, shape, or form. They sent the order that this should not, that these talking points should not be allowed to include any reference to terrorism per se, or at least it acting as a terrorist attack, but rather that they need to be told that this was something that was a result of a YouTube video. So I think that was the political motivation behind it. What I think is sad is how many people are around the administration, including the former Secretary of State, Secretary Clinton, knew this to be the case and allowed this to move forward anyway. You would have hoped that people would have stood up and said, this is wrong, the American people deserve the truth. That didn't happen.
We do need the answers. Let's hope there is more to this. Meanwhile, let's talk about what you're going to be busy with. I know up on Capitol Hill, the Senate is going to start considering, is it true there are 300 amendments now to the Gang of 8 suggestion on how to reform immigration?
Yeah, and I think that's a good thing. I mean, I know that a lot of people are shocked by the sheer number, but this is a very complex issue. It involves everything from how we treat the high-tech industry to what to do with people that are here illegally and all sorts of things in between. So it's not unusual. And most of the amendments, quite frankly, are very productive. They're designed to make the bill better. Here's the good news. The good news is the vast majority of Americans understand and believe and support an immigration reform package. In fact, today a letter was released, 24 conservative groups saying, we support immigration reform if you take measures to ensure that this never, ever happens again. What people are saying is, we'll do immigration reform, but only if you make sure this never happens again. We don't get another wave of illegal immigration. That is a very reasonable request, and I think that's what many of these amendments are aiming to accomplish.
What do you make of the fact that Jim DeMint, who was big with the Tea Party until and they're in the Senate as well, until he went on over to the Heritage Foundation, essentially you guys are at loggerheads over immigration. Heritage came out with a study that said that if this immigration bill goes through, it's going to cost the federal government at least $6.3 trillion in, all the entitlements and other things that the immigrants would wind up getting through the course of their lives.
Well, first of all, I have tremendous respect for Heritage, and especially from Jim DeMint, who's a personal friend and a mentor, and we work together on virtually everything. We have a disagreement on how best to do immigration reform. I dispute that report in the strongest possible terms. It's based on assumptions that just aren't accurate. They're basically claiming that all these people that are illegally here will all become citizens and that they will all be poor for the rest of their lives. That's absurd. They're claiming that a quarter of the cost that they calculate, first of all, this is over 50 years, and a quarter of the cost that they claim are for things like parks and roads and police, things you're paying for with or without them. Here's my last point. The Social Security Administration yesterday sent me a letter in response to my letter. Their letter basically says that immigration reform, as we have structured it, will grow the economy of the United States, it will add jobs, and it will be a net positive for Social Security. We got that letter yesterday. The fact is, if we do immigration reform right, it will be good for America, it will be good for our economy, it'll make us safer, and it'll protect our sovereignty.
Well, the ball is in the Senate court right now. Let's see what happens. Senator Marco Rubio joining us from Capitol Hill. Sir, thank you very much.
Thank you.
You bet.